We're ready to start this hearing. Good evening again. This hearing is on the Water Board rate proposal to the New York City Water Board for fiscal year 2015. My name is Mario Bruno, and I will be the hearing officer for this meeting. Let me begin by talking about how this hearing will proceed. I'd like to note that we place certain documents into the official record that pertain to public notices, listing these hearings, the notice designating the hearing officer, the draft of the proposed water and wastewater rate schedule, the public information booklet regarding water and wastewater rates, a copy of which is available in front, and also written statements. These are marked Exhibits 1 through 4. After I introduce the members of the New York City Water Board, we will hear a presentation from DEP Deputy Commissioner Steve Loritz, who is also the Executive Director of the Water Board. If you have not yet signed up to speak, please take the time during the presentation to do so. There are sign-in sheets at the front table where you walked in. You can also submit written testimony today to this board, which will go into the record and copies distributed to the board prior to any votes. I will now introduce the members of the board that are here with us today: Jonathan Golden and Alfonso Carney, and as I mentioned before, Steve Lawrence, who's the Executive Director. Board Member Carney, do you have anything to add before we begin?
Sure. Thank you, Normally at this stage, our chairman, Alan Moss, would have a few remarks. Alan can't be here tonight and asked me to say a few words on his behalf. First of all, thank you all for coming. This is a public hearing. The more members of the public we have here to tell us what they think about this proposal, the better off we are, and of course, the better off we all are. We have open lines here. We're here to listen to comments, to take your questions. Steve will make the presentation and we'll then take your questions. We're looking forward to your participation in all of this. This is the last borough hearing. We've been in all 5 boroughs. Tonight marks the last hearing. We will sit and consider the rate proposal on Friday. That's right. The meeting's on Friday. We are, just for your information, we're authorized at 7 members. We are at 5 now, hoping to have 2 members appointed in the not too distant future. And of course, several of those people could not be here tonight. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you very much for coming.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Carney and Mario. So I'm Steve Lowitz, Executive Director of the Water Board. Thank you for coming tonight. Commissioner Emily Lloyd, who did make this presentation at the last 4 borough hearings, emailed very early this morning to say that she was sick, she has a fever. She had hoped to attend, she had hoped to rally later this afternoon, but she's still ill, and she does send her regrets. I'll make the presentation that Commissioner Lloyd would have made. I hope to show quickly the ingredients that go into the water rate and how we came to propose the increase that we're asking the board to consider, and we're asking the board to adopt this Friday, May 23rd. You have a chart that shows the last 9 years of actual rate increases, and the proposed rate increase for the fiscal year that begins July 1st is a 3.35% increase. It's the lowest increase in 9 years, the lowest increase since 2006. And the effect on the typical single-family home would be to raise the annual water bill approximately $33 a year, or 9 cents per day. We're also showing the effect on multifamily dwellings, apartment buildings, which typically use less water than a single-family home. Last year at this time, when we were proposing the rate that's currently in effect until June 30th, we had forecast that the rate increase that we would need starting this July 1st is 7.8%. As I showed on the last slide, we're able to reduce the size of the increase by 57% to 3.35%. We've had a series of factors that have gone in our favor and in the ratepayers' favor this year. First is the new mayor, Mayor de Blasio, has agreed to return 10% of the rental payment that the water board is required to make to the city every year. He's agreed to return that to the water system. That's $22 million this year, and that will be returned to the system, and that helps to mitigate or lower the size of the rate increase for next year. Our revenue collection has been stronger than we had budgeted. We are about $160 million ahead of plan as of today, and we'll get into some more detail on that in the next few slides. It's largely attributable to the benefits that we've gotten from our investment in automated meter reading, but we'll show more on that in a minute. As you'll see later in the presentation, the biggest single piece of the pie that makes up the expenses of the water system is debt service. The Water Finance Authority issues bonds to pay for DEP's massive capital program, one of the largest in the region, and they pay interest on those bonds. So the lower interest rates, one of the silver linings of the economic climate of the last few years is interest rates have been lower than expected and are saving us $153 million this year. And we've had a series of discussions with our regulators that have enabled us to avoid, so far, another set of very large, very expensive capital projects that would have cost us additional billions of dollars. I'll get into those later too. And through a series of initiatives that DEP undertook starting 2 years ago, we've had operational cost savings in a variety of areas, including chemicals and energy, that have saved us $34 million. When looking at other costs that make up the cost of living in New York City, this is a chart that shows how much higher than the national average components of our cost of living are. So over here on the left side, you have apartment rentals, condo or co-op sales, or 1 to 3 family home sales. And in each of their categories, they're over 100% higher than the nation. And then the recurring costs of living in the city, electricity, gas, cable, heating oil, you can use that instead of gas, unleaded gasoline if you have a car, are all significantly higher than they are elsewhere in the country. The only thing that is very close, almost even with the national average, is water, which is about 0.5% higher than the national average. This is how we compare to the other 30 largest cities in the U.S. in terms of our water rates and the cost for a typical single-family home. This is New York. This is the average for these 30 cities. And New York, as I showed on the last slide, is ever so slightly above the average. On the extreme end are cities like Atlanta and Seattle, whose rates are more than twice as high as New York. And this chart shows how these cities have grown over time. So you see Atlanta had a very steep increase, primarily to fund federally mandated sewer programs. Chicago, which has just begun a steeper increase. You should know that Chicago is so much lower than the other cities because Chicago has a different structure than most other cities. The homeowner or building owner traditionally only paid about 40% of the cost of water. General taxes paid for the rest of it. Most other cities, the customer pays the entire water bill, just as in New York City. So, while we're trying to contain rates, we're also trying to improve our customer service. And as I mentioned before, automated meter reading has been a huge boon to us. It has resulted in an 80% reduction in estimated bills. Before we started installing automated meter reading, 17% of our bills citywide were estimated. That was unacceptably high, and it was the biggest single cause of complaints from our customers when they got bill after bill that was estimated, and maybe years later they got an actual bill and we were finally able to get into read the meter. As of last month, we were down to our lowest estimated bill rates ever, just 3.5%, which means that almost 97% of our bills are based on actual meter readings. It's eliminated a lot of disputes. Nearly half of our billing disputes since we began to install automated meter reading. But we've also been able to mine the technology to roll out a number of customer service improvements. So people who subscribe for free to our automated leak notification program, the automated meter reading system will detect if your water usage is much higher than normal, and it'll generate an automated email to you to let you know that you may have a leak. And for those of you who don't have email, it'll generate a regular letter that will get sent to you within a few days. And it enables the customer to look for and stop the leak before the customer gets a quarterly bill that may have up to 3 months worth of extraordinary water use on it. We also, and we've saved customers so far $47 million collectively by letting them know early that they have leaks. We also, a year and a half ago, rolled out the Service Line Protection Program, and we'll have another slide on that later on, but we have 141,000 customers enrolled in it already, which exceeds all industry expectations about how quickly customers, in cities where this program has been in effect for a much longer time, they don't have this fast an enrollment rate. And while we're containing costs, we're also improving operations. And these are just a few indicators that get reported by City Hall on the New York City Gov website at least twice a year. And we're resolving leak complaints where there's a water main leak almost 10% faster. The time to restore water to customers when we have to shut water down to repair a water main break is 7% faster. Sewer backups down 30%, and catch basin complaints are down 30%. We're also looking at the longer term, and this is perhaps especially important in communities in Queens, and especially here in the Rockaways. We're looking to make our system more resilient and less prone to damage from next major storms. So we've been part of the citywide effort that produced a stronger, more resilient New York. And we also released DEP's own New York City Wastewater Resiliency Plan back in October, where we propose investing $315 million to elevate critical components. All of our 14 wastewater treatment plants are by the water, and they're especially prone to damage in the types of storm that we had a year and a half ago. By investing this $315 million, we'll be able to avoid having to pay 3 or 4 times that much down the road to repair damage after the flood has destroyed vulnerable parts of our system. We have recently completed some of our biggest projects ever, some of the biggest projects ever to be constructed in this region. We have the, here, lower left corner, this is the Catskill, Delaware ultraviolet light disinfection facility, or as we call it, the UV plant. It's the largest one in the world. It is larger than all the other UV treatment plants in the US combined. It can process, it can treat over 2 billion gallons of water a day. That's twice as much water as New Yorkers currently consume. So, like many other parts of DEP infrastructure, including the tunnels and the reservoirs that were conceived over 100 years ago, we plan and we invest to make our facilities work and relevant far into the future. Sorry. Here are the digester rates from the Newtown Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant, our largest, our 14 treatment plants. It underwent a many-year, $5 billion complete upgrade. And last October, we formally opened Stage 2 of City Water Tunnel number 3, the green line here. This is a project that started in the 1970s. And so now we have 2 water tunnels, water tunnel number 1 in the blue, and water tunnel number 3. This was an earlier stage that opened in 1998, and the new stage. We now have redundancy in the ability to deliver water in Manhattan, and that will enable us to take water tunnel number 1, which was opened in 1917, out of service to inspect it for the first time in 100 years. A very important part of our system that is almost complete and will go into full operation next year is the Croton Filtration Plant. It is a $3 billion investment. It's being built 10 stories underground in Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx. And when it's finished, it will be able to filter water that comes from the Croton system, which is our oldest system. It's east of Hudson. Parts of it date back to 1842 when fresh water was first brought to New York from upstate. Because it is east of Hudson and largely in Westchester County, there's been a lot of development surrounding the watershed, and the water, which has always been safe to drink, but it does experience discoloration and changes in taste seasonally. The filtration plant will treat it, and it will be, again, world-class quality water. And just so that no one has any concerns, right now, no one is drinking Croton water. It's out of service. It will be out of service until the plant is turned on next year. This, going forward, is the biggest project in our 10-year capital program. It's actually a program called Water for the Future, which is comprised of many individual projects. If you've attended these hearings before, you know that we have a leak in the Delaware Aqueduct. That's this blue line here with the bubbles rising to the surface. we've had a leak there that we've known about since the 1990s, and we need to repair it permanently because the Delaware Aqueduct carries half of the water that New Yorkers drink every day, over 500 million gallons of water a day. And so nearly $1.7 billion project is building a 3-mile bypass tunnel with 2 shafts about 700 feet deep, one on each side of the Hudson. The project is going very well. These shafts are currently under construction. The tunnel itself is going to be awarded in a contract next year. And that is by far the biggest project in our capital program, and it will allow us to permanently fix the leak in the Delaware Aqueduct and ensure that we can continue to deliver the 1 billion gallons of water a day that New Yorkers drink. We have some capital projects in Queens, a lot of capital projects in Queens, and this is just a sample of them. We're building out green infrastructure, which will help absorb stormwater and detain it so that it doesn't enter the sewer system, so that it doesn't overload our wastewater treatment plants, and so that it doesn't cause flooding. And we're building out $340 million in sewers. Again, Southeast Queens, Rockaways, the areas that are most prone to flooding. We've also been, as I said, containing our costs. We have 81 separate initiatives that are collectively saving us almost $40 million a year. Savings, $12 million a year from staffing, $11 million from renegotiating our chemical contracts and some of our service contracts to get lower prices, and $8 million from looking at the way we treat wastewater and finding less expensive ways to treat it while still meeting all of our regulatory requirements, and another $5 million from renegotiating contracts for biosolids, which is what's left over after we've treated the wastewater and we have to remove it from the plants and remove it from the city. Despite the cost-saving initiatives, there are some increases that we have to build into the budget for next year. As part of Water for the Future, when we take the Delaware Aqueduct out of service in 2021 approximately, and so we won't have the aqueduct to deliver those 500 million gallons a day, we need to lay the groundwork now for conserving water. So we have a $13 million program to install water conserving fixtures in public schools, in the city university, and in the Parks Department. Those programs are already underway. And unlike any other city agency, DEP pays property taxes. We pay $165 million worth of property taxes on all the property we hold upstate. Our watershed covers about 2,000 square miles. And every year the taxing jurisdictions raise our property taxes, and we're expecting a $5 million increase. I said before that the biggest single component of our cost is the debt on our bonds. And the biggest single driver of our debt over the years has been federally mandated projects. They begin with federal regulations, and New York State typically enforces those regulations on us. And so we've had to build a lot of projects within a short period of time. And if you look at the black portion of each year, the black portion is the mandated expenditure. These are projects which, while improving water quality for the most part, and we might have built them eventually, but because of federal mandates, we've had to build them on a specified schedule, and or else face very expensive penalties. And over the last 10 years, almost 2/3 of our expenditures were mandated. Looking out in the future, most of the mandates are behind us. We may still be facing some in the future. It depends on how the regulators and we are able to work out our differences in interpreting federal regulations. But minimizing the amount that we spend on mandates has allowed us to spend more money on those things that we consider most important, like building out the sewers in Queens. And the effect of making all of these billions of dollars in investments each year is that we have to pay principal and interest on the bonds. We have to float the bonds as the construction work is taking place. And this red line is the interest we pay on those bonds. And as you can see, it keeps growing, even as our planned expenditures decrease. And that's because when you go back to the very beginning of the current structure in 1985, the water system issued about $500 million in bonds, or $500 million. This year alone, we are issuing over $2 billion in bonds. And so, while we're retiring our oldest bonds, $500 million worth, we're replacing them with $2 billion worth. And that's similar to the pattern we're going to see for the foreseeable future. So we expect this red line to continue to increase because the bonds that we issue are typically 30-year bonds. So how do we arrive at our 3.35% increase? This is the pie that is the water system. It's a total of $3.6 billion. The largest piece, almost half, 45%, is debt service. Operations, daily operations and maintenance, about 40%, and other expenses, including the rental payment that we're required to pay to the city, $233 million. Looking at the fiscal year that begins July 1st, well, these are all those same numbers that are in this chart. There's the $3.6 billion that's up here. And we need to have a substantial year-end cash balance to protect the system against any unforeseen occurrence, because we need to be able to run our daily operations, we need to be able to pay our bondholders. So when you add in the year-end cash balance, our total need is $4.4 billion. There's the same $4.4 billion. We carried over money. We expect to carry over almost $700 million from June 30th into July 1st. That will go immediately to paying debt service on some of our bonds. And we have about $200 million in revenue that we get from our upstate customers, north and west of the city, and some other sources of revenue. So the in-city revenue need from the 8 million people who live in the city who drink New York City water, our 836,000 bill-paying customers, is $3.5 billion. So we expect to end this year taking in just under $3.5 billion. We also have experienced over the long term decrease in water consumption, which has been a fairly predictable 1.5% decrease every year. We're expecting a similar decrease next year. Plus, we also have some non-recurring revenue, primarily as some of our annual flat rate customers convert to metered billing. And so if we weren't to raise the rates at all this year, we would take in just under $3.4 billion. But we need, as I said, above $3.5 billion. So we need $114 million to make up the difference. $114 million divided by $3.4 billion is 3.35%. The rental payment. The city is, the water system is required to make a rental payment to the city every year. It's set in a perpetual lease with the city at 15% of our debt service. So This is the rental payment that we owe to the city. It's about $200 million a year. Starting 3 years ago, there was an agreement in the prior administration to cap the rental payment at the 2011 level plus inflation. And so the water system has had returned to it for the benefit of our customers $12 million last year and $9 million in 2013. And the new mayor, Mayor de Blasio, has agreed to return an additional 10%, $22 million, for a total of $36 million to be returned to the system this year. And that's the equivalent of about 1% increase on the rate. So if the mayor hadn't agreed to this return of the rental payment, we might be looking at a rate increase that was closer to 4.35%. We are also rolling out, as part of the changes on July 1st, a number of changes to our rules that we hope will benefit our customers. For the first time, we're going to offer a home water assistance program. This is modeled after the Federal Home Energy Assistance Program, or HEAP, which in the city, HEAP is administered by the city's Human Resources Administration, and we've been working in partnership with the HRA, and we are using the same list of residents and building owners who qualify for reduced energy bills under HEAP. Those same building owners will be able to benefit from our home water assistance program. And through the program, New York City will put a credit on qualifying homeowners' bills. And we're still working out the details of the homeowners' bills, but it could be a credit of somewhere between $100 to $200 a year. And 75% of those who we expect to benefit are single-family homeowners, and over 60% are elderly. We have had, for a number of years, a leak forgiveness program for extraordinary leaks that customers cannot usually detect. So a pipe that's behind the wall bursts, and you may not know about it. You may not know about it for months until you get a very high water bill from us, and you realize that this leak has used thousands of gallons of water. But up until now, we haven't given the forgiveness and the reduction on the bill for leaks for fixtures that you can see, like your toilet and your kitchen faucet. Because the theory was, if you can see it, you can fix it. But we know, and we hear from our customers, and 25% of the billing inquiries we get every year are from customers who had a leak in a maintainable fixture like a toilet or a sink, and want forgiveness for it. And so we are going to provide that starting July 1st. And the program is designed to encourage homeowners to find those leaks, repair them quickly, and we will give them relief on the bill. We have had a minimum charge. In fact, many water utilities and gas and electric utilities have either a minimum charge or a fixed charge, which represents that utilities, by their nature, with their thousands of miles of distribution systems, are fixed cost operations. Our minimum charge has equated to using about 100 gallons a day, and it's been set at $1.27 a day. We're freezing that this year, so unlike past years where the minimum charge got increased by the same percentage as the general rate increase, we are freezing that this year. And we estimate that that will save our customers, and 25% of our bills are issued at the minimum charge, that it'll save those customers collectively about $2 million a year. I mentioned the Service Line Protection Program. That's a program we offered starting in January of last year. It's been immensely popular. It's a voluntary program. A lot of homeowners don't know that the service line that connects their home to the city-owned water main is, by city law, the responsibility of the homeowner. So is the sewer pipe that leaves your home and connects to the city sewer main. And if it breaks, it requires a plumber who's licensed to excavate in the street, and it can cost $5,000 to $15,000, which is a big hit on the homeowner. This program that we rolled out last year is very affordable for about $450 a month. You can protect your water line for about $850 a month with the proposed rate change. You can protect your sewer line, about $13 a month for the two combined. And the contract that we have with our service provider, American Water Resources, or AWR, allows them to increase the price of the sewer protection program only this year by its index to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics index for plumbers. So that index went up 6% since we first introduced the program. 97% of our customers sign up for both the water and the sewer protection program. So effectively, they'll be experiencing a 3.8% increase, which is similar in size to the overall water rate increase. We're extending the deadline to file an appeal with the Water Board if you feel you haven't gotten satisfaction from DEP and a complaint about your water bill. You can file a final appeal with the Water Board. In the past, we required you to file that within 30 days of receiving a decision from DEP. Now we're extending that to 60 days. We are going to halt the lien sale process for customers who are in arrears and would otherwise qualify to be included in the lien sale. But if they have a pending appeal with us, then we will take them out of the lien sale until that appeal has been decided. And we're also suspending interest for 90 days for customers who have automated meter reading newly installed. And as I mentioned before, our past history when we didn't have AMR was customers with where we couldn't get access to the meter or the meter wasn't functioning properly. They would receive a series of estimated bills. Then when we saw it automated meter reading and they get their first actual bill in many years, it's a big surprise, an unpleasant surprise. And so we understand in some cases you can't pay that big an increase all at once. So we want to give you time to pull together the resources necessary to either pay the bill or come to us and ask to have a payment agreement. For our multi-family conservation program, which represents many large apartment buildings, it provides financial certainty to those building owners because they get an annual flat rate bill. And we previously had deadlines in order for them to stay on the program, and we had the certainty of a flat rate bill. They needed to install a new meter and automated meter reading and have their fixtures be water conserving fixtures, low flow fixtures. We've extended the deadlines on both the installation of the meters and the low flow fixtures to June 30th of 2016, more than 2 years from now. And then we are rolling out a toilet replacement program for the first time since the 1990s. Again, as part of the Water for the Future and our need to conserve water. before we make that cutover of the Delaware Aqueduct in 2021. So we are providing a $125 voucher to install a low-flow toilet. And then these two bullets on the bottom are a number of safeguards that we put in place just to protect all of us, that when we distribute the voucher for $125, that it's used for its intended purpose, which is to replace an existing toilet with a low-flow toilet. So just recapping again, a 3.35% increase. The typical single-family home, about $33 more a year, or 9 cents a day. I thank you, and I'll turn it back to Mario Bruno.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Lawrence. We're now going to, before we proceed, I just want to recognize that we're joined by 2 more members of the Water Board, Arlene Shaw and Adam Friedman. We're now going to open the public floor to comments from the public. Speakers will be called up in the order they're listed on the sign-in sheet. If you wish to speak or ask a question and have not signed up yet, please do so now. I'd like to call up the first speaker, and that is Mitch Knoll with the office of Councilmember Donovan Richards. Mr. Knoll?
Good evening. On behalf of the councilman and the councilman, I would like to thank everybody for coming here tonight, and also he wants you guys to know that he's really excited about the increase of the water rate, the lowest water rate over 10 years. And also he wants you guys to know that today, this afternoon, they were a hearing for the Pinson Street as the Deputy Commissioner just mentioned $22 million that was allocated for Pinson Street that would have started in the summer. We don't have the exact date of when it's going to start it, but we know that it's going to start it this year in the summer. Thank you very much for that time.
And you mean start? Did it go through the Department of Design, Construction and Design?
All that already taken care of, sir.
Hmm?
It's already taken care of. It will start pretty much the groundwork. It's going to be in the summer.
You're going to dig at the ground?
Yes.
Yes, it's we work in conjunction with the Department of Design and Construction.
It takes 10 years to get out of it.
Yes, ma'am.
The notice to proceed was issued for May 5th, so the contractor is starting, authorized to start.
I'm curious. They keep calling it now the Pinson Street project. We have had in the works or promises for the last, that was supposed to be finished last year. They called it the Chandler Street project. Now, I want to know what they did.
It's the same project.
Okay,
It's the
just
same
want to
project.
know.
It's the same project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Eugene Fallick with the Bayswater Civic Association. Mr. Fallick?
I'm glad to see all of you here today. First of all, I would like to put you on notice for federal and state criminal prosecution. I would suggest you are knowingly and deliberately mailing fraudulent bills. You are billing people for sewer usage on water that you know perfectly well is being used to sprinkle lawns and is not going into the sewer system. You provide all kinds of benefits for bottlers and so on. I believe you have a legal responsibility to come up with a computation for water which is used on lawns and does not go into the sewer system. Number one. I would suggest you ought to consider increasing the charges and pay off the bonds, which would reduce the interest cost, would reduce the cost of paying the city. Next, you have the ability to make a very good, educated judgment if a person develops a sudden large leak. Why don't you notify the customer when the water usage increases suddenly and dramatically? Finally, DEP and DO-IT have an ongoing problem, which I've raised many times, that there is no way to report a failure of the water supply system outside the city of New York. You can go right here, down to the Nassau Expressway, where we have a 3 or 4 foot water main running under the Nassau Expressway in Nassau County. If there is a leak there, if someone were to call 311, they would say, not my job, not in New York City. And I know, because there are fire hydrants installed on the main for venting purposes. And one day someone opened one up. A lot of water comes out of it. I called the 311, got no results. For hours. Eventually the fire department came out and closed it. What would happen if an aqueduct upstate failed? If the Kensico Dam failed? And someone called, 212 New York? 311, and said, there's 1 billion gallons of water headed down towards the city. What would happen? 311 would say, not my problem, it's not in New York City yet. Finally, what would happen if there were an earthquake? Are you people prepared to shut down the water tunnels? Do you have any ability to do that at the fault lines? I would suggest you don't, and you are grossly negligent. Grossly negligent. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Harvey Rudnick with the Community Board.
No,
No? Okay.
I just have a question, perhaps.
Sure.
My home has a sewer that's about 300 feet long.
Would you mind speaking there for the public record? Thank you.
My home was built about 1929, 1925. Beautiful little home. My sewer line goes from my home to Healy Avenue, which is approximately 300 feet. If I take your insurance, do you cover me? It's called, I think it's called a builder's sewer. I have no idea what the cost. It's cost me a fortune to clean it.
Rather than answer your question possibly incorrectly, now if you give me your address and we can look up your sewer connection, and we can ask our vendor and we can get you an accurate answer.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, if we have no more questions and no more speakers, we'll proceed to the adjournment of the meeting. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've got some questions.
Would you mind stepping up the mic for the public record, sir? What is your name?
Neil Mohammed. So the question I have, at the beginning of the presentation, they spoke about the rate increase would be going to the board. What exactly is that process? What does the board do with this rate increase? Proposal.
The board, there's several steps involved. The board has to go through a series of resolutions to approve a budget for the entire water system. saw me present that $3.6 billion proposed budget. The board would first have to approve that, and then there's, assuming they do approve it, there's a second resolution that asks the board to approve a specific rate increase, and so they would be asked to approve it at 3.35%. The resolution would also ask them to approve each of those customer service changes that we listed towards the end of the presentation, the freezing of the minimum charge, the liberalizing of the leak forgiveness program, and so on.
I mean, does the board do any due diligence as to validating the numbers that are presented to them, or they just take it at face value?
We are required, and the structure that was set up that created the board by state law in 1985 requires that, well, certainly the board needs to be satisfied that the numbers they're seeing are true and accurate and the best available information at the time. We're required to present to the board 3 certifications, one from the city budget director that certifies the operations and maintenance expense. And so the city budget director is certifying, in effect, the part of that $3.6 billion pie that is not the debt service. The second certification is from the executive director of the New York City Municipal Water Finance Authority. He must certify that the debt service, that 45% of the pie, that is the best estimate of debt service at this time based on all known factors. And then the third certification is from our independent consulting engineer, AECOM, which must certify that the operations and maintenance expenses and the capital investment together will, in their judgment, keep the system in good working order.
Thanks. I mean, it's just that I haven't been to one of these, and I don't understand the process very well. So that's why I'm asking these questions. But for the past, according to the charts, for the past 10 years, they've consistently voted to increase their rates, right? I've never, it looks like it's unprecedented for them not to do that. I mean,
There have been, there was one year, I'm sorry I don't remember the specific year, but it was sometime in the last 5 years where between the time a rate was proposed and the time that the board adopted a rate, approximately 6 weeks later, that the board adopted a lower rate than the one that was proposed. And then, again, I'm sorry I don't remember the specific year, there was another instance, I'm going to say approximately 10 years ago, which is before my time at DEP, where the board approved a lower rate than the one that was proposed.
yeah, you know, it just seems to me that this is just a process. It's just that the rates can go up no matter what. I mean, is that fair to assume?
The board has a legal obligation. The board must approve a rate that pays for all of the debt service, all of the operations and maintenance, and the rental payment that are incorporated in those certifications I mentioned. They have a legal obligation to do that. They must do that.
I see. Okay. So, in terms of like issuing the bonds ongoing, are you issuing less bonds now or more bonds than you were 7 years ago?
We're issuing fewer bonds now than we were when our construction was peaking. If you remember that chart, it peaked in 2007, 2008, and then the next few years that followed that. So we issue bonds as actual construction takes place. Since the size of our construction program is smaller now than it was several years ago, and it will continue to be smaller, then we're issuing fewer bonds, yes.
It seems like the red line that keeps going up is the main factor in determining whether you raise rates or not.
That's correct.
And that red line doesn't appear to ever be going down. I mean, it's just going to keep going up, and hence rates will keep going up, I think, right?
If there ever comes a time when new construction, the annual value of new construction is less than the dollar value of bonds we're retiring that year, then it will begin to go down. That's something, if that day occurs, it will be many, many years in the future.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Does anybody else have a question or want to speak? Yes, sir. Please step forward. What's your name?
Howard College.
Thank you.
This is just a simple question, especially because I work mostly in sustainability circles, and I'm very big on not wasting water. A question about the toilet replacement program. Will that be available to a company or a building owner who's already taken advantage of the program in the early 90s?
I believe it's limited, to buildings that are on the multifamily conservation program, so mostly, multifamily homes, and that it's intended to replace high consumption fixtures with low consumption. So if a building already has low flow toilets, but maybe they're at the end of their useful life, that's not what this program is intended for. And just like the program in the early 90s was intended to replace high flow with low flow, not to renew what already was a low flow fixture.
Okay, and just so I know, what are we calling low flow? Yes.
3 gallon or 1 gallon?
Do we,
I believe it's 1.2.
1.6?
The current program for ultra lows.
1.2 gallons per flush.
Okay. That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Oh, yes, sir. Could you come up with the mic? State your name.
Everyone, Mohammed. All right, as the board members, Mr. Lawrence, thank you for the presentation. It was very well done. And good evening to everyone. As other people have said earlier, it's about 10 years these rate increases have been increased for water rate increase. And as Ms. Lawrence earlier just predicted, the rates will continue to increase based on that red line that we saw. Now, your capital construction cost keeps going up. You said it's been going down because of reduced construction costs. But based upon some of the charts and some of the future projects that we see, it looks like it will continue to increase and not be reduced at any significant reduction rate. But at what point do you expect these construction projects to be reduced?
Oh,
Yes.
Is that the question, at what point?
Yeah.
Oh. I don't think I'm going to give you a precise answer because, among other things, as we indicated in the earlier part of the presentation, a lot of our infrastructure is over 100 years old. The wastewater treatment plants, the 14 wastewater treatment plants in the city, each one of them is like a big factory, either a big factory or a very big factory, and each of them has thousands of pieces of equipment that have to be replaced. And so there's always going to be a need for construction. And as I also indicated earlier, even though we've been recently successful in pushing back some federal regulations that would have required us to spend several $billions more, there may come a time when the regulators or the courts will say, now you have to make those investments.